I want to tell you something that isn't easy for me to say. So here it goes. I left Canada. Not because I hated Canada. Quite the opposite. I left because I loved Canada. I loved my family. I loved my friends. And that made the decision harder. In fact, I left when I noticed the storm clouds coming in 2015. I grew up believing Canada was one of the best places in the world to build a life and retire. A safe country, a wealthy country, a country with institutions and opportunities that left ordinary people actually building wealth. And for a long time that was true. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The Canada I thought would be my financial future, my forever home, stopped looking like a retirable place to build a life. I had to ask myself a question I never expected to ask. If I want to retire comfortably, is staying in Canada the only way, or even the best way to make a life? I didn't wake up one morning and decide to leave. It happened gradually. I started noticing something unsettling. Housing prices climbing every year. 65-year-old grandmas that used to work at coffee shops were nowhere to be found. A government that refused to answer Canadians' questions in question period at Parliament. A forced ideology that didn't make sense to me. On top of all that, the cost of living kept rising and jobs kept disappearing. And all of a sudden, it seemed increasingly difficult for ordinary people, especially young people, to save enough to retire. The math was getting worse, not better. You could work hard, earn good money, and still feel like you were falling behind. That's when I realized something important. My retirement wasn't guaranteed just because I was Canadian. It was guaranteed by one thing, whether I could save more than I spent. And in Canada, that gap was shrinking. I thought it would get better, but sadly, it got worse. And this is where my gut feeling got backed up by the numbers. The OECD has documented something that matters to everyone planning for retirement. Canada's productivity and GDP per capita performance has weakened significantly over the past 2 decades. In 2026, the OECD confirmed that Canada is on path for stagnating real income growth relative to its peers. Now, why does this matter to your retirement? Because GDP per person is a rough measure of how much economic output is available for each person in the country. You see, when population grows faster than the economy, you can save money, but the purchasing power disappears. The OECD was very clear. Population growth supported headline GDP by GDP per capita, trending lower and fell below pre-pandemic levels. Translation: it's getting harder to build wealth in Canada, not easier. And if you're planning to retire, that matters. Now, here's what's truly disappointing. Canada has every advantage. Abundant natural resources, functioning institutions, one of the world's largest freshwater supplies, energy, agriculture, access to the world's largest economy next door. America is not our enemy. They just see what Canadians don't. Open borders make it everyone's problem. At the same time, ordinary Canadians are finding it harder, not easier, to save, invest, and build the wealth they need for retirement. Let me be clear. What you're seeing here in this video is the good part. Beautiful homes, wide streets, communities, and neighborhoods that tell a story of wealth and prosperity from decades past. What you aren't seeing is the crime, the homelessness, the drug use, and the despair on people's faces because they have given up and lost hope. There's even a system that's designed to assist people who just want to die by assisted suicide. These things I mentioned are hidden in plain sight. That's because each neighborhood tells a different story. I started asking a question. If I stay in Canada, am I betting on things that will change? Or should I be smarter about where I build my financial future? What discourages me the most is that the narrative fed to Canadians by the media famously coined suicidal empathy by a famous Canadian professor named Gad Saad. But what about the children, they say? We need to protect them. Bring in the censorship bills. But what about the poor seniors? They say. We need to protect them from banking fraud. Bring in the digital currency. But what about climate change, they say? Let's tax everyone and shame them by way of a carbon tax. Yet they let our forests burn. I didn't want to rely on a government that spends Canadians' tax dollars on these kinds of issues. And so, I made a decision. I moved to Taiwan. And here's what I discovered. The decision to retire well doesn't have to be tied to your passport. Taiwan offered me something Canada wasn't giving me anymore. The ability to make my own decisions. Save aggressively by way of a lower cost of living. A booming economy. And the freedom to think differently about building wealth. My housing in Taiwan is a third of the cost. My daily living expenses are lower, and the healthcare system is top-notch. And that meant one thing. My savings rate shot up. I could invest more, compound more, get closer to my retirement number faster. This isn't about Taiwan being better than Canada. It's about understanding that your financial future depends on one formula. Income minus expenses equals what you can invest. And that formula can work differently in different places. Leaving Canada forced me to think about my life and retirement differently. I stopped thinking, where should I retire? And started thinking, where can I build wealth more efficiently? These are different questions. Retirement used to mean you stayed put until you can afford to stop working. But I realized something. Your retirement strategy doesn't have to be geographically bound. You can earn in a strong currency from clients worldwide. But living somewhere with a lower cost, you can accelerate your retirement timeline dramatically. This is financial arbitrage. You're not being un-Canadian. You're being strategic about one equation that actually matters. Building your nest egg. Countries don't become wealthy because they bring in more people. They become wealthy for bringing in the right people for the right reasons, then providing the infrastructure before they arrive. Canadians became wealthy because they turned resources into productivity, innovation, and rising living standards. Right now, Canada is struggling with that conversation. The Canada I once knew is over. On the other side of the world, Taiwan is crushing it. And that's not criticism of Canada, it's reality. If you're planning your financial future, you have to see reality clearly. The question isn't, is Canada bad? The question is, where can I maximize my wealth building potential? Sometimes that's in your home country, and sometimes it's not. I still love Canada, and I miss Canada. That's probably why this video is difficult to make. When I look at the Canada flag, I see a country I grew up in. I see family. I see the place that gave me my education and the experience needed to move abroad and create multiple income streams. But I also see something else in Canada, a country where building enough wealth to retire comfortably is getting harder every single year. The Canadian dollar is now coined as the Canadian peso. I didn't want my tax dollars being given away to greedy billionaires. And I don't want that to be your future either. So here's what I learned. Your retirement doesn't live in one country. It lives in a number, and that number can be reached from anywhere, if you're intentional about where you build it. Whether you stay in Canada, move abroad, or split your time, the math is the same. Income, expenses, investment, compound growth. Your passport doesn't determine your retirement. Your strategy does. Maybe you'll stay. Maybe you'll move. But make that choice deliberately, not because you feel trapped, but because you've done the math and you know where you can build wealth faster. That's the long view, and it's available to anyone willing to think beyond borders. Hit subscribe to follow my journey. Do the Wealth Builder checkup, and let's build smarter retirements together. That's the long view. See you in the next one.